With the first pick in the 2019 NBA Draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Zion Williamson from Duke.
Up for the layup! Oh, blocked by James! They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan. Right back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Mamba out.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Shot Clock Podcast. Today I'm joined by Kyle Draper, Celtics pregame and postgame host for NBC. Kyle, man, how you doing today?
Good, hanging in there, man. Just enjoying these NBA playoffs so far.
Kyle, I want to kind of talk about your career because many young people, they look into the sports analyst game and they're like, this is something I'm really interested to, watching the guys like Stephen A. Smith, even you out in Boston. I'm sure kids are watching you. So how did you originally get that first inspiration to make that leap?
Well, it's a crazy story. It's a long story, but I'm going to make it a short one. I actually started out in college as a civil engineering major. So growing up, I wanted to be a civil engineer, or so I thought I did. Until I got to college and, I got to my junior year and I could not pass this one math class. It was called differential equations. I think I failed it once and dropped it twice. And so at that point, I said, Kyle, you got to come up with something else. This civil engineering thing isn't working for you. And ironically, my roommate at the time, he was a sports broadcasting major. And I said, you know what? I like sports. I like watching it on television. Why don't I give this a shot? And it's crazy. Once I made that switch, I was a struggling student when it came to civil engineering. But once I made that switch to sports broadcasting, I started making the dean's list. I started getting all A's. And it just took off from there. And so, a lot of times you hear people say, it's my lifelong dream. Well, for me, it wasn't. It was, it was like, all right, let me try this out. And, one thing Brian Scalabrine told me, and it sticks with me, even now, and I work with him at NBC Sports Boston. He said, everybody's path is different. Everybody's race is different. And so just because Kyle Draper did it one way doesn't mean you can't do it a different way. And so I tell young people that all the time. My path worked out for me and your path will work out for you, but it's crazy. I'm in my junior year and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought it was civil engineering, but clearly it wasn't.
Yeah, my story kind of built off what you just said. My story is kind of like, even though I'm only 16 now, I always wanted to go into movies. I wanted to produce a movie. I wanted to look at those end titles and see my name kind of scroll through. And I remember in middle school, we had on like our own little news show, and I remember getting cut from that, and that completely brought me down. I was like, do I really want to do this? And then I get to high school. I see our news program we had there. My sophomore year, I try it out. And I just like suddenly took that leap where it's everything kind of just flowed into place. And now here I am interviewing guys like you. I've been able to talk to a few NBA players and through video games and everything because of the connections I've made. So yeah, it's you're right. The pass, everyone ends up getting where they want to be if they really put their focus into it. But it's just crazy to see how many paths can be different, like yours with civil engineering.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I go back to civil engineering and I realize I truly didn't want to be a civil engineer. It was my mom who wanted me to be a civil engineer. And so then when I started to follow my passion, things actually worked out. And here we are.
So a little bit about your pre-life. I remember before the podcast, we were shortly talking about you being originally working out in Louisville for a while. So did you always grow up a Boston fan, or were you from around the Louisville area?
I'm actually from Philadelphia, and I hated Boston growing up. I hated Larry Bird. I hated Boston baked beans. I hated New England clam chowder. I hated it all. And, because we had that rivalry, Philly, Boston, that's a big time rivalry. And growing up, I was a Lakers fan also. Go back to the days of Magic Johnson. And so we hated Boston. But, after college, I worked in Wisconsin. I worked in Washington State, and I worked in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was at that time where, we're talking 2009, I got a call. There's a job opening in Boston. And I'm going to be honest, Boston had never crossed my mind. I'm like, Boston? But at the time, you got to remember, Boston, and maybe still is, the greatest sports city in the entire country. At the time, the Patriots were winning Super Bowls. The Red Sox were good. The Celtics in '08 had just come off the championship. The Bruins were good. I remember thinking, when you watch ESPN, when you watch SportsCenter, Boston teams are always in the A block. They're always up top. So as a sports fan and sports broadcaster, why wouldn't I want to go to a city like Boston? And so I bounced around a lot, but Boston was never on my radar. But now that I've been here 11 years, this is home for me, man.
Yeah, which like you and me, you grew up a Lakers fan, I grew up a Lakers fan, and it's kind of ironic that you grew up a Philly fan as well, and now they just sweep the Celtics sweep them. My bad, but yeah, it's kind of ironic that originally you grew up loving them, and now the team that you've grown that relationship with just takes that sweep. So, kind of, how are you feeling coming off that sweep?
No, I feel good, man. The Celtics are playing great. They got a tough matchup with Toronto. I mean, Philadelphia, with Ben Simmons being out, they're a bad basketball team. Embiid is overrated, in my opinion. They just fired their head coach. But I will tell you one thing about being in the business. You sort of, when you bounce around a lot, you lose part of that fandom. Like, you lose that attachment to a single team. And so what I tell everybody now is I want every game to be memorable. We saw Luka Doncic hit that shot the other night. I want every game to be like that. I'm all about moments. For me, every series would go 7. Every game would go to overtime. I hate blowouts. And so being in the business, you sort of lose that fandom of one team. You become a fan of, the team you're around, I guess. But ultimately, I want great games. I want to be, 20 years from now telling my kid, I remember back in 2020 when Jason Tatum scored 60 on LeBron James. I want moments like that. And so it's kind of different, when you bounce around a lot and you're in this business. It's hard to, hang on to those roots that you grew up with as a kid.
And you with the Marcus Smart jersey behind you, he's such a key player to what the Celtics has building on, and something not many fans outside of the Celtics fandom would expect heading into that season or heading into this season. So his growth this year, what's it been like kind of watching him improve over time?
No, it's been amazing because Marcus Smart is one of the few guys that can control the game without scoring the ball. A lot of times, when you look at the box score, you notice who's the leading scorer. Well, Marcus Smart makes winning plays. Here's the thing about Smart. I remember when he first came into the league. The knock on him was he couldn't shoot the ball. He was a hothead, uncontrollable. But, man, if you ask any of the Celtics if they were picking a roster and play pickup ball, Marcus Smart is that first guy you want on your team because he does whatever it takes to win. And right now, he's the longest tenured Celtic. He's been here the longest out of all the players. And you talk to the players in that locker room, they say he's the heart and soul of the team. So Smart is my guy, man. And the thing I love about Marcus Smart, I'll tell you this quick story. 1, anytime I need an interview, he says yes. 2, this past Christmas, he gave each of us in the media on a Celtics broadcast team a $50 Target gift card. It's not a lot of money for a guy like that, but it's really the thought that counted. That's the first time an athlete has given me some sort of gift, like a Christmas gift. And he gave that to the whole Celtics broadcast team. And so, those are the kind of things people don't see about Smart. They see him hustling. They see him diving on the floor, playing hard. But he's also a great dude off the court.
Which he kind of was, you say, hustling and being a great dude off the court as well. Have you grown a relationship with him over time personally?
Yeah, exactly. You see this jersey right here, it's a signed jersey. Marcus Smart hooked me up with that. And so, like I said, here's the thing about Marcus and really all athletes and how I like to do my job. I keep it professional, though. I don't ask them to go above and beyond to do anything for me, and they don't expect anything less than of me than to do my job. And so we're not hanging out. We're not going to dinner together. I'm not texting them left and right. We keep it professional. If I do need something, if I do need an interview, if I do need him to sign this ball for a young kid, he'll do it. But I think players respect, just being professional with your job. You don't want to come across as a guy that's a fanboy that just wants to get close to the players, to hang out with them. You have a job to do. They have a job to do, and you keep it professional.
Now, I do want to point out one thing. You said keeping it professional, but a lot of times players have a hard time keeping it professional between media and them. We see Russell Westbrook is one of the guys that's always had a problem with the media in the locker room. So kind of what's your take on media versus players?
it's a tough job being in the media right now. And it's not just athletics, news, whatever you want to call it. It's tough being in the media right now. I'll tell you a quick story. This was early last season, not this season, last season. Marcus Morris, him and I got into it a little bit. I was at a game, and my colleague, Sherrod Blakely, said, Kyle, don't look for Marcus Morris. He wants to see you. And I'm like, what'd I do? And so, my job is to commentate on the game, pre and post game. So if Marcus Morris has a bad game, I'm going to talk about it on post game. So I said, tell Marcus Morris I'm out here. I was hanging out on the floor. So Marcus Morris comes out. I call him over. I'm like, yo, what's up? You got a problem with me? What's happening? He's like, yeah, I heard you said I was struggling the other night, or, my shot was struggling. I said, you were 2 of 15 or whatever it was. I said, it's my job to call it like I see it. I said, if you play well, I'm going to be the first one that praises you and hypes you up. And if you don't, as somebody that's, speaking to the fans at home, they appreciate honesty. They don't want a bunch of fan guys or fan boys or fan girls. They want you to be straight up. And so I told Marcus Morris that. And so it's difficult to be a media member. But if you keep it professional, if you don't take shots at people, don't make it personal. You know what I mean? And so I think that's one of the things that Russell Westbrook had a problem with is, at times he probably felt guys were making it personal. To me, it's never personal. It's all about what you do on the basketball court. If you play well, I'm going to hype you up. If you play bad, you're going to get criticism. That's as simple as it can be.
That was kind of building that ability, because I know it's going to be hard, especially when that's the team you get paid to work for as a media analyst as well. And so kind of building that confidence, kind of point out what's wrong. Was that a little bit hard at first, or is that something you always had?
Yeah, a little bit, especially early on when I started doing Celtics games and stuff, because you're right. You basically work for the Celtics. You're part of the team broadcast. And so how I like to spin it is when there's a 50-50 play or 50-50 scenario, I usually give the Celtics the benefit of the doubt. But you also got to understand, I work with Tommy Heinsohn, who's been a part of the Celtics organization for 60 years. I work with Brian Scalabrine, who played on that 08 championship team. I work with Mike Gorman, who's been calling Celtics games for nearly 40 years. Those guys bleed green. I, in my opinion, have to be the voice of the fan. I have to be the guy sitting on the couch wondering, why the heck is Brad Stevens playing this player in this situation? Well, why the hell did Marcus Morris or Marcus Smart take that shot? And so, that's how I like to do it. I try to balance out. We got enough homerism with Scal, Mike, and Tommy and those guys. I try to balance it out a little bit, play a little devil's advocate, when I'm working.
Now, you mentioned some of the legends in the broadcasting part of the Celtics. Where do you think, by the time your career is said and done, where do you think you're going to rank amongst those guys?
Oh, I can't be legends like that. I mean, that's like, trying to be better than Bill Russell if you're a Celtics fan, or try to surpass Kobe Bryant, if you're a Lakers guy. It just can't be done, right? And so at the end of the day, what I'm hoping is a long-lasting career in Boston. It's a great job, takes care of my family. I'm watching a great franchise, a great basketball team. If I could just be mentioned in the same sentence as those guys, that's great. But I will tell you, I've been doing play-by-play recently, the last couple of years, and it's the hardest thing in the world, man. I've been a studio guy, a reporter. I can talk to people, but there's an art to play-by-play. And so mad respect to guys like Mike Gorman, Mike Breen, the national guys you see. They do it so effortlessly, but it's such a hard job. And so, I think the challenge of being a play-by-play person has really helped me out, because I needed that challenge. I needed that something to strive and work for. And that's what's happening here. Just to be mentioned in the same sentence as those guys, man, that's all I can ask for.
Now, is play-by-play something you still kind of hope to further on to, or is that kind of test it out for a little bit and let it go?
No, here's the thing. I'm always thinking, all right, how can I make myself more valuable? What's next in my career? Am I really going to be the pre and post game guy for another 20 years? Probably not. So what's the next step? What's the next evolution in my career? And in my eyes, it's play-by-play. Sure, I'd love to do a national show. I'd love to be Ernie Johnson or somebody like that doing these national shows. And I'm pretty sure I could do that in my sleep. But, this challenge of being play-by-play, I don't know if I'll be good at it, but I'll tell you this, and I'll tell young people this all the time. You won't see me back down from the challenge. You won't see me say, nah, I don't think I'm good enough to do it. No, I'm going to give it a try. I want somebody else to tell me, no, Kyle, you're not good enough for it, because it won't be for a lack of trying. And so that's where I'm at right now. Think about it. Mike Gorman's been calling Celtics games for 39 years. Think of how many games that is. He's called thousands of Celtics games. I've called 15 maybe. And so it's hard to compare myself to those guys, but that's the world we live in. And so I'm just trying to get better, man. And if it happens that, I full-time play-by-play at one point, great. If it doesn't, at least I could say I gave it a shot.
Now, before we get into COVID, I kind of want to talk about, or I want to ask this real quick. For kids wanting to get in this business, how would you describe the challenges of trying to get into sports broadcasting?
Man, it's so hard right now just because there's so many people that want to get into this business. Every year there's a new crop of college graduates. Here's what I say, though. Here's how you set yourself apart from the other people. A, get in as quick and early as you can. You're doing a great job by doing this show. You're getting the experience early. So whether it's an internship, part-time job, whatever, get in as soon as you can. B, don't be afraid to go to smaller markets. So many people, I've met throughout the years, they want to start in LA or New York or Boston. And I tell young people all the time, while you're waiting for that perfect opportunity in one of these major markets, you could be gaining valuable experience doing the job in a smaller market. Think about it like this. I've seen many people get jobs in LA, New York, Boston, and only last 1 year because they weren't ready for these major markets. Why not go to a small market, learn, make your mistakes? I'd rather make mistakes in front of 30,000 viewers than 1 million viewers, if you know what I mean, right? And so that's what I tell young people. Start early, make your mistakes in the smaller markets, and just be yourself. Think about this. You mentioned Stephen A. Smith earlier, I think. The thing about him is it's not his content, it's his personality. It's not that he's talking about the Celtics that make you want to watch. It's how he's talking about the Celtics. And so I think people are attracted to personalities more so than the content. So be yourself, get in early, and don't be afraid to travel and work in small markets.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the personality trait. You watch a lot of these broadcasters, even you, it's like such a very spoken out voice, a lot of different personalities. Everybody's outgoing in this business. They're always willing to speak their mind. They're willing to talk about it, even poke a little bit of fun out about these things. So I love that you bring that up. And
yeah, that's huge, man. Because think about it. I tell people all the time, anybody can do the job, but who are the most successful ones? Who are the ones you remember the most? It's the bigger than life personalities. And I'm not saying go out there and try to be Stephen A. Smith or try to act like so-and-so, Shannon Sharp or Skip Bayless. Why don't you be the best you, the most outspoken you? And I think it'll work out.
Yeah, it's the outspoken part. It's just like Mike Breen, one of the most outstanding voices because he was just him, spoke his mind.
Right.
Like the bang on the Ray Allen shot. It's just memorizable. It brings those memories to the fans. But I want to bring up COVID had to impact your job greatly because right now you're even still in Boston. Just kind of talk about what COVID did for you.
COVID has had a huge impact on the business. I'm sort of here in my home studio. We've been doing a lot of broadcasting from home. But think about it. We got the NBA playoffs going on right now. I would be on the road covering the playoffs or, Mike Gorman and Scal would be on the road. Now we got to do everything off TV like everybody else. It's impacted our business immensely. And so, one of the best parts of this job was being able to travel with the team, ride on the team plane, go to the games. Now we can't do that. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that again. And so, it's been difficult. But I will say, these 4 months off, we've sort of been able to reinvent how we do television, how we do broadcasting. Who would have thought that people would actually be working from home and broadcasting from home like we're doing? So this is sort of a new normal. I think even when the vaccine comes, we get back to normal, you'll still see a lot of working from home, a lot less travel when it comes to going to games, that kind of thing. It'll be interesting to see, too, because now you're seeing games without fans. will the games with fans come back? You know, one of the great things about my job is I was at every Celtics home game. Now there won't be any fans there, so maybe we don't broadcast from the Garden as much anymore. And so I think it's changed things a lot. You know, we're still getting it done. We're still having all our shows. The games are back. It's exciting, but we're missing something without fans, and it's because of COVID-19.
Now, you've been in the studio a few times since the bubble kind of came back, but your first step into the studio, probably in a couple months, I would think so. What was that kind of feeling like being back to business?
It was exciting, but I was also nervous because think about it. You're in this big building with other people, and so, this virus supposedly is crazy contagious. You know, I got a wife and kids, I got a family. And so you walk into this massive building and you have your mask on, and it's kind of eerie, because, we had hundreds of people working in this building because we had some other TV stations in there with us. Now there's only a handful. So it's kind of weird. It's a little bit depressing because you miss being around everybody. You miss the camaraderie, saying hi to everybody. But, it was weird because you're walking around with this mask on. You're making sure not to get too close to anybody. It was just different. But I will say, once we're on air, man, once we're back doing our shows, you forget about COVID. You forget all about the troubles in the rest of the world. You're just locked in talking basketball with your buddies, basically. And that's one thing I miss. As much as I love being at home, seeing wife and kids, I miss hanging out with the guys, talking about the game. And that's one thing being back in the studio has allowed me to do. Yeah,
that's one thing I've noticed since the NBA was gone, even late July when it came back. I remember I was kind of nervous for it to come back. I was like, oh, what if someone ends up catching it there and the whole season just ends up getting thrown off? And I remember that was a lot of the trivia against fans is like, what if the season ends up getting canceled while they're in the bubble? But like once basketball came out, it's like I forgot about everything. I was just like, basketball's not my life. I've got to focus on who's winning the championship, what teams have the best chances right now. And it's just an exciting feeling. It's something that felt unlike many other times when basketball came out. Like when the season would return after a season being finished, it's just that kind of excitement is what I got out of that.
Yeah, and think about it. We got games on, all day long. You know what I mean? From 1 o'clock, 1:30 till midnight. It's like college basketball, the tournament, March Madness, except for NBA playoffs. It's actually pretty great that you can sit around and watch, 4 straight games, from 1 o'clock to midnight. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things is like I'll get home from school or even while I'm in school, I'll pull up my Xfinity app on my phone and I'll be watching whatever game's on. It'll be like Milwaukee versus Orlando. I'll be like, yeah, right. I know Orlando's going to lose this, but it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch some of this game. And so it's different. You're used to being like, for me in Indiana, you're used to being like playoffs kicking off, Heat versus Pacers, first round, Baker's Life Fieldhouse will hold the first 2 games, and you're used to being like, all right, that's where all the fans are going. But now it's just, you look at the screen and it's just fans on the screens instead of fans in the stands. So how do you describe that kind of change?
Well, it's been different. I will say the NBA has done a good job. Like, I actually like the fans, the virtual fans, because you could see their reactions and, you see some of the celebrities that they throw up there. But it's nothing like being at Bankers Life Fieldhouse with 18,000 screaming fans or being at the Boston TD Garden, with 18,000 fans. I mean, it's the basketball has actually been good, but there is something missing, right? The excitement down the stretch. I still get a little nervous when games are close, obviously, but it's just not the same. But like we said, this is like a new normal, and it's actually the product has been better than I expected. The games have been competitive. The stars are still the stars. Giannis is still Giannis. Jason Tatum is still Jason Tatum. LeBron's still LeBron. So it's been great, man. Yeah, it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah, no, you talked about keeping these games intense, which I was going to bring up the Luka Doncic point we had yesterday. But for a little thing for fans here, this is way pre-recorded, but the Luka Doncic game winner last night, especially with it being on Kobe's birthday, there was a 50-point or 2 50-point performances from Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell, the 43-point, 17 rebounds, 13 assists from Luka. It's kind of watching these young stars show up. Where do you see these young stars living up to the potential of stars now like Giannis and LeBron and Kawhi and all them?
Yeah, for sure. And here's the thing, growing up, a player's prime used to be 28, 27, 28, 29. That would be like when you finally figured it out. Now, these young boys, their prime is 22. I mean, I think this is the most talent under 25 that we have ever seen in the NBA. And I understand this because guys can come after 1 year of college or come from overseas, that kind of thing. But man, when you look at the best players in the playoffs, sure, you got LeBron and AD, but you mentioned Luka, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I mean, every team has a young stud, man. It's an exciting time for the NBA right now. Like I said, Luka's 21 years old, and he's already an MVP candidate. Can you imagine Luka being at this level for the next 12 or 13 years? He's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. I'm not afraid to say something like that. Think about it. A 21-year-old that you can already talk about having a Hall of Fame career already.
Yeah, I know. For me, it's like I want to go on Twitter and be like, Luka Doncic is already going to be a Hall of Famer within the next 2 seasons.
You should do it, dude. You should do it.
But it's like these guys are 22, and it's like you never would have thought watching. I wasn't born around the time when LeBron was drafted, but you never would have thought when LeBron got drafted at 20 or at 19, and then all the way up to 22, being like LeBron's already a Hall of Famer. That's the type of thing you get from guys like Luka Doncic. Even Jason Tatum here in a year or so, he could be in that conversation for close enough to Hall of Fame. And even though none of them won a championship, it's the talent. You know it's going to happen year later.
Yeah, and I think LeBron started it. Maybe you could go back to Kobe Bryant, but let's not forget Kobe had some, some issues that first year. He was coming off the bench early in his career. Had that series against who was it against? Was Utah, I think. Was it Utah where he just kept shooting and kept missing? And so LeBron came in, missed the playoffs his first couple of years. But now you got Luka, second year in the league, got the Clippers on the ropes. You got Donovan Mitchell, third year in the league, about to carry his team to the NBA, past the Denver Nuggets, got them up 3-1. I mean, these guys are great.
Yeah, and it's like the Denver Nuggets, they were expected to kind of make a chance for it all besides the Lakers and Clippers and Bucks. They were also one of those contenders up there, especially once Jokic got skinny. It's just that change in the game. It's like these young stars are carrying the league right now, and it's just that immense change is just wild to me. But we've got about a minute left, so before we end off, I kind of want to talk about what's your starting 5 all time for the Celtics?
Ooh, for the Celtics all time. And I got to stick with positions, right? I got to say a point guard. So you got to go with Bob Cousy as point guard. At 2 guard, I'm gonna have to go big at the 2 guard. All right. So I'm gonna say a guy like Paul Pierce at 2, Larry Bird at 3. So I go John Havlicek at 4 and Bill Russell at 5. That would be my starting 5. For the Boston Celtics. And I hate to leave out Kevin McHale, Kevin Garnett, Robert Parrish, my guy Tommy Heinsohn, all these great players. But, man, that would be a really good starting 5 right there.
Well, Cal, I thank you for coming on, man. It was great getting to talk to you, and good luck falling onto the season.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
If you guys like The Shot Clock, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple, even Instagram at The Shot Clock Pod. And we got another full couple months of playoff basketball, so talk more about that next episode.